Hello. Today I'm going to look at some questions and comments that you have sent in and talk about those. So the first question from Kevin. Do you ever care about the number of views and subscribers you have / get? Okay. And then you ask a second question, but I'll come on to that. I was checking it doesn't go to a whole conversation. The answer is no, not really. Views and subscriptions are not important. For example, I have subscribed to very few channels. Those are channels of whom I consider my teachers in this business, if you like, in Theravada Buddhism, in specifically the Thai Forest tradition. Senior monastics whom give Dharma talks on channels I have subscribed to. Now, whether it was YouTube or in the olden days it was sort of podcasts, I think, or just different websites, it is irrelevant. I'm listening to the Dharma from people, teachers whom I respect. So they're the only channels I've subscribed to, and some of those channels may have very few subscriptions or views. It is irrelevant. It is what I want to watch, listen to, hear, see. And this is the same for most people. There are channels with millions and millions of subscriptions and millions and millions and millions of views that I would never consider watching, and others with no subscriptions, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 and a few views, that I would watch. And the same with you, that there would be such channels of different interests. So it's largely irrelevant. However, one can get an idea of the interest in the subject that you are discussing, but it isn't that accurate, so I don't consider it important. So in answer to your question, do I care? Well, I certainly don't care about the number of views and subscriptions because it isn't important, but I do care that the content that I put, because I'm just a contributor to this channel. This channel is not me. I'm just repeating teachings I've heard and sharing my experiences via this medium. If people are watching it, then that's good to know. But much more importantly, and what I do care about, is the comments I receive, the questions that I receive, which are directed to me, and emails, which give me an understanding of the people who are actually watching. Because it doesn't matter if you have 1 million subscribers and 1 trillion views. Those people only need to have clicked a couple of buttons and maybe not even listened for more than 30 seconds or so. And they count. But if someone sits through me talking for 20 minutes and then thoughtfully puts pen to paper, hypothetically speaking, and asks a question, they are who I care about. People who are watching this to understand the teachings of the Buddha, and if I can help them, then it gives me encouragement to continue doing this. And you do need encouragement to continue doing this, because if what I was saying was falling on deaf ears, let's say, if it was just numbers, statistics, analytics, views or subscriptions, then there would be no point. it would mean nothing, because these statistics are generated out of literally clicks, and the Dharma is something that needs to be listened to, understood and experienced. So I can share my experiences with you, and you can ask questions or make comments and share your experiences with me. And this two-way relationship is what I hold to be important about the content I provide on this channel. So I hope that makes sense. But then you go on to ask, hi again, then why add subscribe in a few? Like, do they need encouragement to be more interested? And that was a thought you had that came up that was nagging after I gave you the answer that I've more or less just repeated. So yes, I say often when I get a comment, I ask people to please subscribe and visit again. And I also put on the short videos, please subscribe here. And often they're referring to a full version of the video. So please watch the full version by clicking here or whatever. And occasionally, yes, I will say or write in the title, please subscribe. Why? Because that is how anyone who is making a comment now or is seeing these videos more than just a one-off video or a very small part of one video came to be here. Because initially I asked that people, if they liked what they saw, subscribed, in order that you do see the next video that comes along. Now, my very few subscriptions, if I didn't subscribe to those, I think half a dozen channels at most, and they're all the Dharma, just slightly different teachers, different styles, whom all really do mean a lot to me and are very important. But if I didn't subscribe, I mean, I have no notifications, none of this stuff, because I just go onto the YouTube, whatever it is, when you open it up, and there's little blue dots on their balls, their bubbles, and I know there's a new video to watch. Now, if I didn't have those as subscribed channels, I wouldn't know that, and I might forget. And then I remember their channel one day, go back to it, and there's 15. And then I feel obliged to catch up, as one does. So I'll spend a whole day binge listening to Dharma. Not a whole day, but you know what I mean. So this is why I suggest people subscribe. It's just an easier way to remember to hear my next video. Because if you've just seen one, the chances of remembering to ever find this channel or look for it again, it's a very, very tiny, not even fish, amoeba in an ocean of huge amounts of fishes and infinite a number of stars in the galaxy. It's just a spot of dust, isn't it, this channel, by comparison to the huge choice there is. So you could stumble across it by accident, as most people would who are watching this in the first place. There's no other way you can find it unless you've met me and I've said, and then actually I've very rarely ever mentioned it ever to anybody. So most people have found this by accident. So the only way you're going to see anything in terms of a follow-up video is if you subscribe, or maybe somehow YouTube does remember and pushes things. I'm not quite sure how it all exactly works, but this is why I do that. But what did I actually say in my reply? I said something a little bit more profound. To encourage people to watch more than the shorts. Yes, because very first of all, most people come to this channel through the shorts, which get in front of people more quickly and more often, and therefore establish a lot more views than the longer videos. So to encourage people to watch more than those shorts and more than one video. And this is in the interests of helping others to see the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma. So yeah, most views and subscriptions a short one-off, but it's from these comments that I receive, these questions that I receive, that I can gauge who the audience, the listeners, the practitioners, or people just simply inquisitive about the Dharma, or just meditation, or even how a monk lives in the forest. Any of these subjects are here and talked about. There's less travel now. I've settled down into this forest here, so from that point of view it's a little bit less varied. However, the questions, the comments that I receive mean that what there is to talk about is more varied. There is going deeper into the discussion of Dharma, but very much so at the simple level of understanding in practical terms that is usable and useful, hopefully, in everyday life. So I think that that is worth developing, which is why I continue to make these videos, ask people to subscribe. And yeah, if one video goes on and, well, they all get views. So as I think I've said right at the beginning, if 2 or 3 people watch that video, that's good enough. It's not important, but if I get comments from a video, that is great, that is important. It's useful, I get feedback, I know what is useful to you, and then that is useful to me. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah. How do I subscribe? Yes, good. So I'm just thinking, is there another question kind of related to that? No, but it is kind of. There is a question kind of related, but not in the same way. So I'll go on as I've got them in order, these questions as they came up. I have answered most people's questions directly. I always try to do that. How long I can continue to do that if there's very many, I'm not sure. But it doesn't take long, and there's not a huge number. So your name is Last Try. Well, of course that's not your real name, but you're known as Last Try on here. And you say, bro. Well, I suppose brother. And when I was in Catholic school, a Catholic monastery was where I went to school, we called our teachers, the monks, we called them brother, you know? Not quite bro, but if you wrote their name down, it's bro. Bro is a rather unfortunate Americanism, shortened form of brother. So I'll take that as brother. Thank you, Last Try. I think you mean to say, does God exist? And I have replied to you, Last Try. That's up to you. And it really is up to you. No one can prove it to you, no one can disprove it to you. If you choose to believe in a God or many gods, this is entirely your choice, my choice, everyone's choice, everyone's options. I can't answer that question. Actually, nobody alive can answer that question. For sure. Who can know? And this is the difference between Buddhism and all religions, in that it is non-theistic, or we're not all atheists because it's not a case of not believing. It is a case of not needing to believe in anything in order to understand the truth that there is suffering, a cause of suffering, and an end to suffering with the path leading to the end of suffering. And this path leading to the end of suffering is purely down to ourselves. It is not for praying and asking for someone to relieve us of suffering. It is not for worshipping anything, statue or godlike figure, or belief in a God person, higher force, power. It is not for hoping that by that worship you will be rewarded. In fact, we look for only being rewarded by our actions. If we do good, good things will happen. If we do bad, bad things will happen. This is a natural understanding of the truth of karma. Karma being not a mystical idea, but the truth that all of our actions will result in something else, a reaction. All actions result in a reaction. Now that may be now or later on. It may be in this lifetime or in another lifetime. What you're suffering in this lifetime may be the result of things you've done in this lifetime or a previous lifetime. It doesn't matter what you believe, and you can believe in one God, several gods, many gods, from Allah to Krishna, to the God, the one God, all of these ideas. It's perfectly acceptable and not contradictory to Buddhism, other than if one believes, puts faith in prayer and asking a God for help, then we would say that is contrary to the idea of Buddhism in its relationship with karma, and that all actions have a reaction, or good will result in bad, good will result in good, bad will result in bad. However much you ask whomever you're asking, only you can help yourself. If it helps to ask, then you can ask. This is a ritual, a practice in itself. But we choose not to do that. So by not believing, it doesn't mean we are discounting anyone else's views, opinions, rituals, and they can worship whom they like, however they like. It is not contrary to the ideas of Buddhism. It is just unnecessary. So, does actual God exist? Personally speaking, I don't think so, I don't believe so, but I do not know so. The one thing I can say, however, if there is a God, or if there are gods, if I keep sila, if I keep the 5 precepts of doing no harm to myself or to any others, and my actions are good, I develop my mental skills, I develop wholesome mind states and reduce unwholesome mind states by practicing simply meditation and developing wisdom. By that, by following this Noble Eightfold Path, then if there is a God, he, she, it would not be offended by me not getting down on my hands and knees and praying or worshipping or offering sacrificial gifts. He would not be, she would not be offended. I would say, okay, this person doesn't believe in me, but they're a good person. So I'm sure if there is such a higher power, I wouldn't be punished for that. So in a way, you can't lose if you practice good behavior, sila. It's a no-lose situation. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Last try. Well, it doesn't answer your question, I can't answer it. Nobody can. And the next question, Krishna. Oh, 2 questions about food. Now that's always popular on YouTube, food. Do Buddhists eat onion? Yes, but there are some Buddhist monks in the northern traditions, I think, I understand, in China. They don't eat onions, garlic, or anything from the leek family. Leeks are like, they've got like onions, many layers. I think it's because they're all from the same family, I'm not sure exactly. They don't eat those kind of vegetables. I'm not entirely sure of the reason. I mean, I heard one reason being they don't want to, you know, be offensive to people, don't want to smell of garlic and onions and this and that. But I'm not sure, I don't know. But as far as generally in Buddhist practice, Buddhists in other parts of the world and in this Theravada tradition, the southern school of Buddhism, we can eat onions, as many onions as we like, and you saw onions presumably in the bowl of the video you were watching and thought, oh, he's eating onions, naughty monk. Well, we're allowed to. And it would be very difficult here in Thailand to avoid garlic and onions, because it's in everything. And that brings me on to the next question, really, from Adiba. Hi Bhante, I have a question. Many monks eat meat, but the Buddha forbidden meat for the Buddhist. Then why do we Buddhists and monks eat meat? Do you eat meat? Okay, this old chestnut. Well, you know, the Buddha did not forbid eating meat, nor did he prescribe that anyone should be, or suggest or recommend that anyone should be vegetarian. It does not say that anywhere in the scriptures. In fact, it does say that his last meal was of meat, and therefore indicated he ate meat. It also is within our monastic rules that we have to accept any food we are offered, which will often, and historically more often than not in some areas, if you go into the northern traditions, into the Himalayas, the Tibetan traditions, vegetables are few and far between. They live on milk and dairy products and meat because of the climatical conditions and geographical conditions. So no, he did not. This has come about through modern suggestion about this Buddhists don't eat meat. But what is very specific is the first precept, that you do not kill any beings. So no killing means that if meat is given to you or you buy meat, then that is okay. But you would be breaking monastic rules if you were to request or accept even meat that was specifically killed for you. So say if somebody went out, caught a fish or killed a chicken and then offered you the food next day, and you knew, or they told you, but you knew that, or suspected that that was what had happened and it was killed for you, you could refuse to accept that in order that it didn't encourage further killing. And because people in this tradition know that that would be the case, they wouldn't do that. I mean, historically, what was the food you were offered was usually the leftovers from the night before. So if they'd had a meat dish, you'd get leftovers. Now, you're not killing by eating that meat. You're receiving it gratefully because you need the nourishment. You need to eat. So if we're offered meat, vegetables, whatever we're offered, we accept it all gratefully. Now, I mean, you asked, do I eat meat? Well, no. Actually, I'm a vegetarian, kind of almost vegan. But this is only my choice. It's nothing to do with because I'm a monk or because I'm Buddhist. It just became something that I took up actually a long time ago when I was in India the first time. And I've maintained that ever since. But I will say here, it's a little, I wouldn't be able to honestly say I haven't eaten meat since I've been here, because sometimes I don't know what's in the dishes here. we accept all the food that's offered, and when it's presented it comes along, and empty our bowls when we return, and then when it's the offering meal time, it comes along in the dishes. And unless you're very knowledgeable about Thai food and cooking and this kind of thing, it's very hard for me. I don't even know what's sweet and what's savoury. It seems to be a whole mixture of things. So occasionally I put something in there and I've not been sure 100% whether it may have some meat content, but I can't be fussy, and I wouldn't be. It's kindly offered and I gratefully receive it, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. But I'd say mostly I think it's what I'd be finding when I get this is like tofu stuff and mushrooms and all kinds of wonderful things. So I don't have to eat meat. It'd be by accident if I did. And usually you know once you start to eat it, literally. But even they have some kind of sweets here that have some sort of pudding sweet things that contain, I think, some kind of meat. And that's really quite hard to understand or determine whether it's meat or not. But I'm getting used to it now. I'm getting to know. I mean, just to sum that up, okay, Buddhists don't have to be vegetarians, right? But Buddhists can't kill. So you don't go to the farmer just before Thanksgiving or before Christmas and say, hey, that nice big fat turkey over there, I want that one, I'll pick it up in a few weeks' time for my dinner. That's a no-no. But if you go to the supermarket and there's 15 dead turkeys dressed up in the refrigerator or the freezer, then you can put that in your trolley and off you go. No need to worry, it was going to be eaten by someone. Don't let it go to waste. Some people take this to even further extremes from their readings and understandings of later commentaries and the Jataka tales and going deeper into the Buddhist scriptures, that you're actually doing this animal a favour by letting its flesh be eaten by you. But I don't really go for that. I think that's a little bit extreme. But nevertheless, the refrigerators are full. They're there and people are buying this food. Now you can go into millions of arguments then further on, which is why I'm a vegetarian, so I'm not going to go into those arguments. But of course, yes, if you're sustaining the purchase of meat, it's encouraging killing, and the links and the causes and conditions go on and on and on. But in practical terms, the reason Buddhist monks are not vegetarian is because we rely on everything we eat being given to us. And it can be I'm in a very fortunate situation here whereby I have sufficient food given each day for me to be selective as to what I eat. But that is not always the case. And certainly when I was in India and through the various lockdowns and things, I had no choice on what I ate in those times. But they don't eat much meat there anyway, so I didn't really ever get offered meat in those times. But I did get offered a lot of dairy products, a lot of yogurt and curd and milk and this kind of thing, which I don't eat. I'm not just because it's not because I'm a vegan, I don't really like it, but I mean I had to eat that. I needed this nutrition. So say I'd been a strict vegan and a monk, it would have been doing myself harm if I turned down, which literally was on many days in those times in India, this is only recently, I'd have fruit offered and yogurty dairy things and pancakes. And that kind of thing wasn't really my favourite, but it kept me going and I gratefully received it. And if I hadn't, and I'd said, no, I want something else, it would have been, wouldn't have been grateful, it would have been disrespectful, and I might not have got eaten properly, and then I would have been doing myself harm, as well as the people doing them harm by hurtful speech and not being grateful. because people make a lot of effort to produce food for you as monks. So I hope that answers that question. So I'm looking at the answers I've sent to you, and that just confuses me a little bit, so I shouldn't do that. Okay, now the final question from, I can never remember whether you're Creel or Savino. I think you said you're Savino, so Creel, Savino, both names I'll say. Here is, how do you handle less than kind people or interactions, keeping metta and no harm? I mean, I'm assuming you mean generally, because I don't have to handle any less than kind people at all, or interactions these days. I'm very fortunate in that people are all very nice. But even verbally, and that's part of the nature of being a monk, I suppose. I think firstly, establish yourself in a situation that these things should not be really encountered. Appreciably in the outside world it's a lot different to living in a monastery, but not always. If something occurs in the monastery, if it's a big community, it's a lot more intense and will affect you far more than a passerby on the other side of the street in a busy city saying, hey bro, I don't like you, poor hairstyle or something like this. That would just be, you'd pass that off as nothing. Whereas if someone came up to you in the monastery and said, hey, I don't like you, then it would be really quite a serious situation. So, but this doesn't happen. The first thing to do is establish yourself in sila. If you keep the precepts, if you are developing wholesome mind states and reducing unwholesome mind states throughout your activities, all of your actions of body, speech and mind, you will only make friends, not enemies. Even your enemies will become your friends. This is the nature of karma. This is how it works. Be good and you will receive good things. But if you're bad, then you will only receive bad things. But in specific answer to your question, how would or how should you handle with metta, let's say, because that's what you're suggesting, and without causing harm, how would you handle those less than kind people, you're being polite, or interactions? Understand it as their problem, and then have compassion. So after metta, there are 4 Brahma Viharas. Metta, which is loving kindness. Karuna, which is compassion. Mudita, which is sympathetic joy or empathetic joy, joy of other people's doing well and happiness. And upekkha, which is equanimity, so being less reactionless, understanding, caring, knowing, still acting but not reacting, equanimous. With these 4 Brahma Viharas, which means the godly heavenly realms, essentially they're called that is because we can dwell in those mind states, live in metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. They are internalized, but also you are internalized, protected, dwelling within them. Now with the development of this, in addition to metta, compassion, and mudita and equanimity, you are more able to understand the person who might well be making less than kind remarks, or being downright awful to you, let's say. If someone gives you something and you don't want it, you don't have to accept it. Say no thank you, you can keep that. And this is the same with a nasty, malicious, unkind remark. You'll hear it. We had an old expression as children, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, of course, words will hurt you more than anything else, and you have to be very careful with right speech not to harm people through speaking. So that's a little naive, but you can choose to look at those unkind words from a different perspective. Where are they coming from and why? It's because of their lack of understanding, their delusion, their ignorance, or an unfortunate thing that's happened to them so far in that day. They may have, we have another expression, got out of the wrong side of bed. I'm not sure quite where that one comes from, but meaning to say you've woken up in a terribly bad mood, or their wife has screamed at them on their way out of the door, or the husband screamed at the wife on the way out of the door, and then that person on their way bumps into you, you're in their way, and they say, oh, just get out of my way, and you feel offended. No, don't feel offended. This is where equanimity comes in. Feel compassion. Ah, she must have had a bad morning, he must have had a bad morning. I hope their day gets better. Okay? And that's a subtle example, but this can extend to really deeply hurtful things that people might say, which I hope doesn't happen to you or anyone. But if it does, it's coming from a place of ignorance, of misunderstanding. Either them misunderstanding their own situation, or them certainly misunderstanding your situation. It could even be that you have a misunderstanding of your situation and have done something wrong. And if the situation is appropriate and it's right to do so, you can ask, why? And they may have a good answer, and you can then apologize if it is just. But more often than not, it is better just to leave it be. Let the comment go over your head. Don't accept it. But don't leave it there. Have compassion for that person, because they are feeling worse than that comment can ever make you feel, unless you dwell on it. You don't need to dwell on it. You've heard it, it's gone. So it's the Brahma Viharas, along with metta also, which you correctly identified as being something that helps you towards receiving ill will, bad feeling, hatred, bad comments, bad speech, but also with the backup of karuna, it gives you the armory, the tools to pick it apart and take away the impetus of the insult, if indeed that's what it is. Often, though, we can be also offended through our own misunderstanding of what someone has said. So be careful of that. Reaction is usually the worst thing you can do. Non-reaction, you can still listen, you can understand. But unless it's really necessary, you don't need to react. You can say, I hear what you're saying, without admitting any wrongdoing, without adding fuel to their fire by giving an argument, just stating a fact. I've heard what you are saying, or I've read what you have written. You can even say, I appreciate your point of view. And this will help to soften their mood, to cool that fire. If you try and put your point across, if you try and say, how dare you say that to me? Why would you say that to me? Or you try to argue, you will only add fuel to the fire. Maybe later on you'll have the opportunity, certainly later on if you see these people again, you will have the opportunity to understand where that was coming from. It will come up again, because even though you might forget what they said, and you should forget what they said, it's been and gone, they won't. It's much harder to forget something you've said bad to someone else than it is to forget something that someone said bad to you. People could say bad things to you all day long and you could just remember a few of them maybe. But if you say bad things to other people, you will remember them all. Because you have the root cause of that thing, what you've done or actions of body, speech and mind said. And it's within you. But if you've just heard some words, it is all you're doing, hearing some words. There's no root cause there, there's no understanding. It's, well, what was that about? You'll soon forget it, but they won't. So it will come up again if you have an ongoing relationship. So the main thing is to do, not worry about it. It's always their problem, not yours. And if it is yours, you'll soon establish that and you'll know that. But don't rub salt in the wound, don't put fuel on the fire. Just let it be. So with that, I'm going to call it an end for today. Those are some good questions. I hope the answers or what I've talked about is useful, and if it is, you can use it. If it's not, you can forget all about it. But for now, I'll say goodbye. Goodbye.